like to explore in more detail. So all these panoramic maps are from the Library of Congress. You can check them out for yourself. They're all historical documents. This is San Diego in 1880, and we're told with published historical figures that 1880 there was a population of about 2,700 people. So this is Coronado Beach, and what we're told is that this is San Diego over here. This looks like what I would expect a population of 2,700 people to look like. That's what I expect it to look like. What I don't expect is this island or whatever it is off the coast of it to be, you know, landscaped the way that it has with this grid-like structure. For 2,700 people, you've got a railway running through it. And what is this? What is this? What is 2,700 people doing creating something like this? Someone please enlighten me. What is these structures as well? Almost like primitive pylons, but very weird looking. But what's going on? Like, how do you build something like this? This reminds me of a building in Halifax in the UK. I forgot what it's called now. It's a grade 1 listed building. What is going on? How has 2,700 people built that? I'm going to explain what my idea behind this grid structure is later on, more specifically in part 2 of the presentation, because I believe that there was a reason for this, and these people didn't build it, of course. This was already here, and there's a reason why America is all gridded out the way that it is, and we're programmed with, you know, sayings like, oh, get off the grid. It's because it was a grid, an ancient grid, a grid for a very specific reason, but we'll explore that. Very interesting little Star of David down there. Interesting. But for 2,700 people, this seems like overkill to me. How have they done this? Not possible. Sorry, will not accept that. Will not accept that that's a possibility to be able to do that. Someone else might, but not me. And in Los Angeles in 1891, we're looking at about 50,000 people inhabiting Los Angeles. Now, I understand that some people may not find this architecture as interesting or as mind-blowing as myself. You're probably too conditioned to living in a city that's got a lot of skyscrapers around, that's got big glass buildings, big tower blocks, but you need to put yourself in the context and frame of reference of the people of the day with the technology that they had available. Look at this big, what's this? The county courthouse. Big clock tower here, big bell tower on top, big dome. Mud flooded windows down here. Phillips block. Good old Phil just owning a block with, you know, something that looks like it could be, you know, some Parisian palace. Good old Phil. And again, you see the same sort of, look at these buildings, just like so over the top for just a population of 60,000 people. City Hall. You know, the high school, was education such a priority at that point in time where they needed a high school with like some old world, you know, castle-like structure, turrets on it, big clock tower, bell tower, mud flooded, you know, get onto the ground floor, you have to go up. Why don't you just make it on the ground floor? And look at this grid layout, the landscaping, the urban planning, you know, the attention to detail, the resources, just not there to be able to produce any of this. I'm sorry, I will not accept it. And for me, like, these are, when I look at these, the actual point of these maps, these are sale catalogs. These are catalogs to catalog these old world buildings and these founded cities so that it can be bidded upon. You know, America is a corporation. Everything's for sale in America. You're for sale. You are for sale. You're on the US Stock Exchange. That's what your birth certificate's for. And when you see this, I see that all these buildings are just listed for sale. Who wants to come in and bid for this? Who wants to own that? You know, this is a building that we found. We can repurpose it as the city hall. This is the building that we found. we can repurpose it as the German Fruit Co. wholesale house. The German Fruit Co. wholesale house. What, you just had the accessibility to ship fruit from Germany? Alright. Fresh fruit from Germany for the local inhabitants of Los Angeles in the 1890s. Yes. What a luxury. New Orleans. Now, New Orleans does have a little bit more of a depthy history to it. French occupation. 1851, we see a registered population of about 116,000 people. But when I'm looking at this again, okay, so we got, I believe that's St. Louis Cathedral. I've been to New Orleans. I had my little beignets down here. Did like those beignets, but when I see this, I see a fully bricked out, built out city. You know, look at the size of this. These big columns, big dome, spires everywhere on every block. You know, this is a city that's for millions of people. Look how far off this goes off into the distance, just all brick building. And you could say, oh, you know, this is just an artist depiction. You know, it's just an artistic depiction. How do we know it was all there? I was like, well, why else would they draw all of this? Like, just leave all this empty if it's not there. But look, it just goes on. And this is a city that's a very old city. Obelisk thing here. Big victory column, or yeah, they normally call them victory columns. Obelisk for me though. Big dome on this building. Very interesting. Down in the corner here, just some little manor house, some little castle, just having this bit of land to themselves. The old steamboats. You know, you put so much detail into everything else, like why would you then falsify all of this? I just find it fascinating, you know, 1850s, like I said, Wild West, how is all of this here? Make it that what you will. And then Pueblo in Colorado, 1890, population of about 25,000 people. I find this very interesting because again, it's just a grid layout, guys. It's like, you know, the grid that's already there. It would take so long to survey this whole land, especially up in the Rocky Mountains where nothing's leveled or uneven. And then look, you can see the higher bits here, lower bits there. All built out, all this grid placed, all like geometrically symmetrical and correct. Like, how have you done that? And then you look at some of these buildings. So for 25,000 people, let's just keep in mind. Then we have this building here. It looks very Egyptian-esque to me. This was called the Pueblo Mineral Palace, or the Colorado Mineral Palace, and this was a place that was built supposedly in the span of 2 years, from 1889 to 1890. So upon the creation of this map, this would have been brand new, and it was created with the purpose of storing valuable minerals and ores that had been mined from all the surrounding areas. And the director of this place was Benjamin Guggenheim, from the Guggenheim family, the Guggenheim Museum in New York. He was the director, and Benjamin Guggenheim, of course, was one of the unfortunate lizards that was taken out in Titanic when he objected against the creation of the Federal Reserve. Him and John Jacob Astor, who we'll also be looking at later on, they both got taken out if Titanic really sank, or if it was a sister ship, whatever. I'm not going to discuss that on this presentation. And JP Morgan housed his own private collection here at the Mineral Palace, and when you look inside of this Mineral Palace, I really recommend that you go and look at pictures of it. It's a very interesting place when you look at the design. The internal design looks like a European palace, and I just don't see how they managed to build that in 2 years in the middle of the Rocky Mountains. Again, we have a lot of factories here. 25,000 people though, bit overkill. Just this whole layout for me You know, this whole layout, I don't know how they've gridded any of this out. In the Wild Wild West, let's not forget, and above sea level, you know, above sea level. Alrighty then, Pueblo, Colorado. Actually, just to quickly zoom in on here, some of these other buildings that you see. Again, just these buildings, central block, just complete overkill for 25,000 people. And this Union Depot is very interesting to look at. When you actually look at the real Union, there are photos of Union Depot, and you can see that for yourself. The Grand Hotel, is there that many people that's visiting Pueblo, Colorado in 1890 that they need a palace-like hotel? Maybe so. Maybe there was. Elmira, New York. There wasn't anything particularly spectacular with the architecture that I wanted to point out here. We're looking at a place that supposedly had a population of just over 15,000 people. It has a big railway track running through it. East Coast, so, you know, more believable than such, more of a population. More resources available, but for me it's the grid layout. You're looking at these grid layouts and it's like, why does there need to be such an immense grid layout for a town of just 20,000 plus people? Like, look at the size. Like, that would go on for miles. You're looking at miles of distance here, just perfectly symmetrical, straight grid, like gridded out landscape, and it just doesn't make sense to me. If it makes sense to you, please tell me. Please tell me how they did this and why they did this. Because all of America is gridded out. And it's not like that in England. It's not like that in Europe. It's like that in America. And in other places of the world, actually, that I will show in more detail in part 2. Yeah. Nova Scotia and Halifax. So, or Halifax in Nova Scotia, I should say, sorry. 1879. Again, not necessarily something that I was particularly impressed with the infrastructure or buildings of the, but more so I just wanted to show you the Star Fort. The Star Fort's still there. Supposedly the Star Fort was built in the late 1700s by the Brits when we occupied that piece of real estate, because it is real estate. And it just makes me think, like, how old is this place? Not necessarily the buildings or the landscaping, but just this bit here. Like I told you, I don't believe that these star forts were built by the people we're told they were built by. And it shows that if they weren't built by who we're told they were built by, and they're much more ancient, you know, we've seen dating back thousands of years in what I was showing you in Europe, and they're built by the same hand. You know, that would mean that there was peoples thousands of years back in America with the capabilities to build a star fort as such. And I do believe America is the real old world. I believe that we've been led to believe that the old world was Mesopotamia, you know, just Europe has the rich history that it does. But I think that the real old world, you know, and then they found Egyptian artifacts in the Grand Canyon. That's something that we will be looking at in part 2 as well, in regards to what the Grand Canyon actually is and how it was formed. I think America was the old world, the real old world, and something happened and the survivors had to go east and west, and then they went on, the survivors of that cataclysm went on to form the Vedic civilization, the Mesopotamian civilization, and you link it all back to like Indo-European, the Aryan race. Maybe the Aryan race came from America, the real ancient America. And that is that. Moving on. Again, this is another example of just extreme, over-the-top urban planning. So this is in Port Arthur in Texas. 1901, population 900 people. Now supposedly there was more people that lived here in the late 19th century, but it was hit by a hurricane and a lot of people evacuated. But I don't see it have been inhabited by such a population where they've built out something like this. Like, what is going on here? Look at this layout. For 900 people, 900 people is about the amount of people I had in my school when I was at school. 900 people can fit into one building, a school building. How do those 900 people then survey and landscape all of this? Please tell me, please inform me in the comments below. But something to think about. What is going on with this? And then we move on to a little examination into the history of the Salt Lake City Temple. It's actually one of my favorite buildings. I'm trying to show you a few of my favorite buildings in this presentation. Just something about this very magical, almost like a Disney-esque castle. Something very epic about it. And then we do actually have photographic evidence of the supposed construction of this, but keep in mind I've shown you that they had, when they did, in this time frame, the ability to manipulate photos and to manipulate the scale of photos and create optical illusions in photos. But we see that in 1865 there's nothing at this site, and then all of a sudden in 1870 they've just got the big turnabuckle, is that how you say it? Turnabuckle, something like that, you know what I mean. Just no construction photos of that. It just appears, just manifests into the third dimension. And then we see over the next 10 years there is photographic evidence of just slowly building this up, right? Until we get to about 88. It goes a bit more, 89, and we can kind of see the top of it being built out there. So in the space of like 10 years, they've built this temple out, so we're told. Okay, just keep it in mind. And then they've recently done some renovations and they had to dig into the foundation, and again they just found this part of the building just completely submerged, an older part of the building, and it goes deep. It goes 14 feet for the granite foundation, and then it goes into a sub-foundation sandstone of these bigger bricks, almost like megalithic bricks. Look at the size of this guy compared to these bricks. So just keep that in mind as well. Something much older, something very suspicious here going on. And I wanted to then show you this. So this is one of the panoramic maps made of Salt Lake City in 1870. And this shows that a population of just under 13,000 people inhabiting this land. Let's not talk about the grid layout yet, but let's talk and discuss why a fully built out Salt Lake City Temple is being shown on a map in 1870 when supposedly they haven't even laid the foundation stone at that point. Yet here we have it fully built out amongst a fully built out grid of Salt Lake City. Somebody tell me what is going on here. 1870, so there's still another 10 years to go yet until they would have finished this. Yet here it is, fully built out. 12,000 people at 10,000 feet elevation in Utah, in Salt Lake City. Where and how? Where have they got the resources to build this? They should again be focusing on, pursuing sustainable agriculture, on sheltering from the elements, from finding, a sustainable, clean source of water, food production. But no, we're just going to build a grandiose castle, one of the most epic, grandiose temples in the world. We're just going to build it. There's only 13,000 of us. We haven't really got much else going on out here in the middle of the mountains. And then who have we got here? The boys are in town. The boys are back. Boys are rolling in with the goods. The boys are in the goods. So this isn't the only piece of evidence to go off of Salt Lake City in 1870. We then have another panoramic map which shows Salt Lake City in 1875. And it's the same story here, where we have a fully kitted out Disney temple right here. Same grid-like pattern, from a different orientation this time though, different vantage point. But again, very hard to believe. Utah Central, oh, look at that, Utah Central Railway. So again, you know, not maybe at like 20,000 people this time, and just 75. So again, it shouldn't have been built yet. It didn't finish off until, you know, 1890. Yeah, here we are, Utah, 1875. Now, what's your thoughts on that? Do you think it's solely down to just artistic depiction of what it's going to look like and that's why it's there? Or do you think that it was already there and they've just, you know, drew it on as they saw it? What is your thoughts? I would like to know. So, urban planning and landscaping, this scale, was it possible during this time frame? The amount of work required to achieve these kinds of large-scale transformations seen in the prior depicted grid pattern cityscapes is immense. The process would involve a comprehensive series of steps and considerable labour, resources and time. These were, in respect to the official narrative, brand new towns and cities in the mid-late 1800s US of A, with very small populations and limited resources openly available due to their relative rural locations. How did just a few thousand people, who should have been focusing on functional survival, food, water, shelter, prioritizing sustainable agricultural development, crop cycles, irrigation, sewage for the community, be capable of allocating such resources needed to organize the following? So in order to build out such a city, initial surveying and planning. So you needed a topographical survey, detailed mapping of the natural landscape, including elevations, vegetation, and existing structures. Urban planning, developing a master plan that outlines the layout of streets, plots, infrastructure, and public spaces. Then site preparation and earthworks, clearing and excavation, removing any existing vegetation, rocks and structures, and excavating to create a level base. That would have been very hard, as shown when you're working at elevation within the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, or you're working up in Utah in Salt Lake City. Grading and leveling, reshaping the land to ensure proper drainage, road foundations and construction sites. No sign of construction sites whatsoever, everything's just built out from the get-go. This can involve significant earth-moving work, especially if the terrain is uneven or hilly. Soil stabilization, techniques to reinforce the soil, such as compacting or adding stabilizing materials to support the infrastructure, especially when you're building such massive buildings. Infrastructure installation, road construction, laying roads and creating intersections and walkways. This involves a substantial amount of asphalt, concrete or brickwork. Again, we've shown that the grid pattern layout was already there from the get-go. Utility lines, installing water, sewer infrastructure beneath the grid layout. Stormwater management, creating drainage systems and stormwater retention areas to handle runoff or preventing floods. Obviously, they didn't seem to care about that. It was just already in place. Landscaping and aesthetic design, tree planting in green spaces, introducing trees, grass and other vegetation to line streets and populate parks. Public spaces, developing parks, squares and recreational areas to enhance the quality of life for residents. Pavement and sidewalks, constructing pedestrian pathways and ensuring accessibility across the grid. Scope of work, so the workforce and machinery needed. This project would require a large number of skilled laborers, civil engineers, architects, and heavy machinery operators. Bulldozers, excavators, graders, and dump trucks would be essential for the earth-moving phase, followed by asphalt pavers, cranes, and other sophisticated equipment for infrastructure. They had none of that available other than horse and buggy and pulley systems. Time frame. Any project of this kind of magnitude could take anywhere from several years to a decade or more to complete with the advanced machinery just stated. Major urban projects with comprehensive infrastructure typically range between 5 to 20 years, depending on funding, workforce availability, and environmental factors. Challenges. Costs. Such projects would require billions of dollars, especially even today with modern labor and material costs. Environmental impact. Large-scale clearing and grading can have significant environmental effects, requiring mitigation strategies to maintain ecological balance. Not on their mind whatsoever. Logistics. Coordinating various phases of the project and managing the supply of material, workforce, and equipment. They had none of this available, guys. Yet they somehow managed to build out these cities in less than a decade with a few thousand people. If you enjoyed this presentation and feel inspired to support both yourself and this channel, then head over to primalalchemy.co.uk. Awaken your potential with the world's only visionary health brand. Discover our collection of tonic herbal elixirs, rare crystals, and holistic health technologies. All chosen and created with intention, so you can focus on the energy you bring into your life. Whether you're grounding yourself, seeking clarity, or elevating your routine, Primal Alchemy supports every step of your journey. Use code REBUS10 for 10% off all superfood elixirs at primalalchemy.co.uk.